checking the comments. In mine there was no kidding.
Nico?
Gut. One of the best. Der war jetzt super.
All right, guys. So thanks for sticking around. Last session for today. Give me a quick summary of how it felt for you. And when was the last time you had to pitch something?
Ooh, I can tell you what I did. I don't have a medical background. I don't have an investment background. I actually have a communication and management background. So quite early on, I supported a team from Israel in fine-tuning their pitch and also training them to have a 2-minute pitch conversation on stage. And then they called me up a couple of days later and said, we have this pitching gig at South Summit in Dublin, but we can't make it, the pitch. Why don't you jump on stage? I was like, okay, can't be that complicated. I screwed up royally. It was my first pitch, and I really, really peed my pants. I was like really, really scared. It was the best training ever. It really felt so real that whenever I see a startup pitching on stage, I feel their pain and their excitement and also the expectations from the audience. So it was a couple of years ago. Web Summit is now in Lisbon, but I never regretted that I actually took that stage, because being in the other person's shoes is just different than being an investor.
All right, Markus.
So you mean pitching a company?
Yes.
So my last pitch with the company was a company I built, biggest fashion e-commerce player in South, Central and Eastern Europe. And I pitched it when we looked for a buyer. So we had an exit on the way, and I pitched to many, many buyers. And we did sound and almost dancing in front of the screen and next to the screen. And it was a cool experience. But as you said, I think it's just anxious, and you just want to get it through as smooth as possible.
Did you get the money?
Yeah, we sold the company to Naspers, big player. Goodbye.
Stefan, you left corporate
My
life
last
went out
pitch
on your
was
own.
last week when I tried to talk myself into a company with zero revenue, at a valuation of 100 million, being just evaluated by one of the top 5 venture capitalists from the West Coast in the US. That's the most difficult thing if you know the founders and they really were in the crypto field, crypto lending. And to get into it, it's the most difficult thing, because they know that 99% of all the presentations you see are bullshit, but the 1% that really matters, there's a long queue of investors who really want to get in it. And there you have to pitch yourself.
When you have these guys pitching here in front of you, how long does it take for you to kind of make a first mental note of, this is going the right way, this is going the wrong way, this is the questions I'm going to ask that person?
So first of all, the question I always have is, how large is the addressable market? And the larger the market there is, then the second question is, how do you see the competitive landscape? The stronger the competitors are in the market, of course, the more difficult it is to enter the market, because if these big companies churn just 1 centimeter, the startup usually is dead, full stop. So the next thing is, how is the management competencies? How is the team proven? Is it bulletproof? Does it have a success record? And if you have people who have done it once, twice, or 3 times successfully, then it ticks all boxes. And then starts the due diligence. Means then you really analyze the market, you really talk to people, you do expert interviews. I do not know serious investors who are very deeply in a topic, who invest into companies serious money without a strong due diligence and doing expert interviews. I do not know one. I know young people who do it. I do not know a serious investor.
Markus?
So I think, when you ask about the first impression, it very much depends on the dynamics you have in the firm, so deal flow you're seeing. So, obviously, Peloton out there not doing well. You have next day a company pitching something similar. You just have a hard time believing them that they do it better than Peloton. So I think there are a lot of external factors influencing you as a team, also as our fund team. When we look to the landscape and see different businesses. And then, you have the, other factors like team experience and so on and so forth. I would say always helpful for us is obviously like if you know other investors investing in that company, if you know the founding team from another company. So this is definitely helpful. But you have very fast the first impression of a specific founder or team, sometimes it's hard to change that first impression, but it really depends. And I think I want to really say this to founders. Sometimes if there is a rejection, first of all, every founder is amazing. I think to build something truly passionate, it's very hard. And I've been there myself, and it's really, really tough. And, even if there are rejections, keep going, keep fighting for what you want to do and what you want to achieve. And sometimes when an investor says no, it doesn't mean it's about you or your business. Maybe it's just like they have done another investment, or it's just not the right time for that specific firm.
Now, I got to challenge Stefan on one statement he made earlier, and then we'll get to the more deeper end of the pool, to put it that way. Somebody admitted failure here. He basically said, I've been in the industry for 20 years, and I failed at least 3 times. Now, the European access, or the way we approach failure here in Europe, especially in Germany, German-speaking countries, that guy failed. He did something wrong. In the United States, you would say, he just found out one more way of how not to do it. How do you see that? And Stefan, could you explain your comment from earlier?
My feeling is one of the biggest bullshit sentences I've ever heard, that the Americans give credit to people who fail. We have from Boda invested into many American companies and have seen them, and that's part of the venture business. Some of them got great and we sold them for tons of money, but some of them imploded. And then you see the people who get unemployed and are standing on the street, and that's one of the biggest bullshits I ever heard. That if in America you fail fast, and you get the next VC standing there and just giving you money because you had a great experience. Bullshit. That's absolutely bullshit. It's always the same. If you have the great companies in America who start, they go to the best venture capitalists. It's like a triangle. They go to the top. Those people it's really a process. So you have the founders of Google who will be approached. You have certain people who are your angels. Once they are your angels, you have a direct access to Sequoia, to Andreessen Horowitz. So the first round is usually provided by those people with massively overfunding. And the people who build strategically great American companies who go IPO, so went through a very long period until being ready for IPO. These are usually world-class people with world-class education. They haven't failed. Show me who has failed from the big. So you hear the stories being built afterwards. We work. That's a great idea. And he got backed again. Yeah. That's a fair point. I'm sitting in the board with the successor from Mr. Newman, and I have heard lots of war stories and how they fucked it up anyway. But I think that's an exemption. If you look at the great American companies today which are listed, I would say probably less than 1% had a serial founder who went bankrupt before. These are usually very good people, and my feeling is it's the same here in Europe. If you fail and if you have a small failure that no one sees, then it's not a problem at all. If you actually got a lot of money and you burn it and the company went bankrupt, it's a bit of challenging. You should do something afterwards that's probably self-funded.
Maren and Markus, you agree?
So it's funny because, I was living in San Francisco for 6 years, moved back to Zurich, where I'm originally from, and I read in the history of the city of Zurich that in the past, failure is similar probably here in Germany, so if you fail, you're kind of out of the game. And it happens that during, back in time, if you failed a business, whatever business you were running, you had to leave the city. So you were not allowed to stay in the city anymore. And I do think probably very similar to here in Germany. It's still somehow in the DNA of Europeans, or let's see, a DACH region. I do agree. I think there is failure in the small. I think you can learn a lot of things in small iterations. If you really scale it big and you've got so much money and burn incredible money. I think Peloton is another one. They burned incredible amounts of money, which is, you really question mark how you can burn so much money in such a short time. And I think on that level, then it's really hard to be backed again. If you have a smaller company and, see it and just don't find product market fit, whatever, I think it's not so black and white, I would say.
Maren, you said before we met today, you basically said right now you're looking for a great combination of software and hardware that will now basically be the next big thing in health tech. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Maybe I'm also a little bit worried about the talks about AI and data, because it's not easy to get good data. We had a conversation about a lot of unstructured data floating around. We also had a conversation early on about how do we secure data, blockchain and DLT technologies. At the end, the human body is the biggest data source we have, and we have not minded that data in the right way. So just to give you an example, you go to the doctors and the doctor asks you, so what was the pain level yesterday? And you come up with a random number because you can't even remember what the pain level was yesterday. So this is the thing, if I have hardware and software devices combined in a way, at least, I can gather hopefully good data at the time that it's needed and can make intelligence out of that. And I do believe that we need sensors to actually gather better data. And I think it's only possible if you have this combination. It could be the rings and the wearables that we already have, but most of these devices are not gathering enough data. And this is also the reason why I do believe that, certain hardware is needed. Like 15 years ago, everybody was like, we have all this data and let's do software, and software as a service and platforms. But then there was a revival of hardware. And I think one of the reasons why now hardware and software combinations also become more attractive is because it doesn't have to take millions to actually develop a hardware device. You have smart materials these days. You have 3D printing opportunities. You could prototype devices in a better way to really understand, how sophisticated certain hardware devices have to be. So I think there's a revival of hardware. And again, if the hardware device provides better data, I'm all in.
Markus, what do you think about it? What are you looking for right now?
So basically, when we look to investing fields, when we look to the current systems, healthcare system, we call it sick care system. You enter the system when it's kind of too late, you get treated, you get surgery, whatever, or military or army, treatments, where something gets fixed and you leave again. And we believe we have to invest in healthcare, true healthcare. How do we see that trajectory? So we believe consumerized health or centric health, so all kind of wearables, at-home application, at-home labs, tests, all kind of stuff, getting more insights about personal health. Imagine that I know more about my Uber driver than I know about my personal health. Crazy. Then second one is prevention. Prevention is super hard. I think we talked a lot about it. It's mainly about behavior change. Behavior change is hard. What are incentives? We all know we should move more, we should sleep more, we should eat healthier, but nobody does it. Then we look into resilience. We believe that the current sustainability topic, global warming, stuff like that, for example, just heat will trigger a lot of migration due to heat. So heat exposure, we probably had one of the coldest summers this summer in Europe. Imagine that. So what will that entail when it comes to the human body? And then when it's further out, it's really longevity, how you enhance prolonged health span. So along these ways we're investing, and obviously, consumerized health, you have faster path to exits, and some take longer.
Stefan.
Yeah, we have a bit different approach. As we are listed in Amsterdam, have raised 200 million for 25 family offices, and we're looking for a profitable company that it has 100 million revenue, approximately, 25 million of EBITDA in this environment, and would like to do an IPO with us. And that's a business combination, and they want to do a business combination. And we identified 120 companies here in Europe, and have time until end of next year. And we had a bit of a shock phase after the stock market came down. So a lot of the people said, especially the profitable one, I do not want to do any IPO. But that's going to change now at the moment, because the private equity market is dead. No one can do a financing round at the moment because the interest rates exploded, and also the margins the banks want now have for leverage financing. It doesn't work anymore. So just to give you a bit of flavor, When you wanted to do a PE deal a year ago, you wanted to buy out a company or wanted to put a stake in a company, you probably had interest rates you had to pay between 400 and 700 basis points, or 4 to 7%. Now the same is between 8 and 12% interest rate. Means a lot of the transactions PE would have bought last year are not profitable anymore. So we are very positive that we will find a target within the next 6 months, a company that probably would have been sold to PE and now goes with us to the Amsterdam Stock Exchange.
How has the pandemic changed the health investment market? Obviously, a lot of countries now, or governments, have to invest in testing and other things. But do you think that will drive also investment in health tech, or is that completely independent?
Look, I think it's a very different topic. Of course, you had the BioNTechs of this world and the Pfizers, and that drove so much money into the whole ecosystem. Don't forget that the owners and shareholders, like the Strüngmanns, who are big shareholders, the public information of BioNTech, also invest a lot. So, of course, that pandemic had a huge, let's say, they have a lot of firepower now with the companies where they made tons of money with. And so I think there will be push into the market. If it comes to health tech, if you talk about technology companies, I do not see at the moment a big influx in that. I'm in this market since 20 years. So I have seen at least, probably you can say, 3 cycles. And at the moment, all the pockets more or less are closed. Because if you see 2001, 2008, if you see now, it is always the same pattern. And the pattern means probably end of next year, under the assumption that we do not go into war with Russia on the NATO base. You know, these kind of super dreadful things we haven't thought about last year, but might occur with a small percentage now. But if that is not happening, we should have revitalization of financing routes, probably down rounds over next year, mid to end of next year. On the IPO field, we probably will see it will take another 3-4 years before we come back. And these public markets valuation drive private markets valuation. Of course, it takes a bit longer, but at the moment, if you see valuations in the field, what can I say? There are a lot of funds who do not spend money at the moment. You see a lot of investors who are backing the good companies, but there is not a lot of new money at the moment in the market. And for those companies who invest now, it is the best thing you can do, because if you look at the vintages, so the return per year, so 2002 and 3 were outstanding great years. 2011 in venture was one of the best years you could have. 2020 is probably one of the worst years we have ever seen, because the valuations went so up to the roof, so you had to talk yourself on super high valuation into companies, and to make a decent return on it, it's more or less impossible. So if there are angels here who want to invest, and you know what you do, yes, if you know what you do, what you're investing into, then it's a great time to invest now. But a lot of funds at the moment, they have eagles in the trousers.
Maren,
they don't get the handout.
You wanted to speak up. What's your feeling?
Yeah,
I really liked what you said about private equity, and there's,
I mean,
market's difficult.
you have to understand that we are talking about different dynamics. So, I mean, if you are in a classic VC, you're basically coordinating other people's money and you invest out of financial reasons long term. An angel investor also looks into what's close to him or her, a lot of passionate decisions. And also you see if, investing excess money that you have is not easy, you can also take a bet and you can also invest like in a solution that is close to you. What I also want to highlight, because we are talking about the time frame, not just from a investor point of view, but also from a startup point of view. So we talk about a timeline where, first of all, in Germany, you have something like DIGA came, big hype, big awakening, a lot of people tested it. I think at the beginning of the year, DIPA came for Pflege, for nursing, so another legislative element that changed. We had a change in government. We had in the ministry also new people coming and going. That all happened in a short period of time. And what happened on top of that, on a European level, MDD and MDR also switched. So some of the startups that were here said, we have a CE certification, but we need to be certified as a medical device now. The medical device certification that is essential to actually get reimbursed in a German market where, 70-something million are in a healthcare system and expect health insurance companies to pay for that. You need that certification and you need the classification. So at the moment, due to all this change that happened in the time of COVID, a lot of young companies can't prove something that is also super relevant for investors because, you can't prove the evidence, you don't have the registration as a medical device, you might even not have the financial support to get a CE certification. So it's also a question of who is there to invest in which stage the guys are investable in, and then at the end, for any kind of investor, do I have the leverage? A certification or, to be registered as a medical device gives an investor also something to work with because it's security, it's access to money, it's access to business. So in all these very, very weird times, all these changes happen. There are a lot of very early stage companies that do not even understand how to enter the market, when to certify, what kind of medical product there are now because of all these changes. So if you talk to an early stage company, of course, from their side, you have a conversation, you're not quite sure, is this company investment ready? Because all the metrics that you would measure a digital health company with are hard to grab at the moment. So from both sides, I think it's quite hard to find the perfect fit in certain cases.
Markus, I think you want to follow up.
Just to add short, I think very much depends on the stage of a company. So what we see, obviously, way prior than what you're looking at, Series A+, B, Cs, all these rounds, Aura Rings did incredible high valuations for their metrics. We see some of the players coming down 50, 60, 70% down rounds. This is happening. All the guys who rose, like in 21 on incredible valuations. So this is a very tough space to play in. A lot of them ensure cash flows, a lot of layoffs happening, Bay Area, a lot of people lay off, focus on runway. So I think this is one thing. On the other side, we have the early stage companies, which I do think, to build up a company, a proper company, as you said about vintage Airbnbs and all these guys coming out of 2000, when they started, 11. So an early stage company needs, 4 to 7-ish years to build up. So right now, to build up a company is not a bad time, because, you need time to be on the market, to get your valuations and so on and so forth. Back in 1-2 years ago, it was so competitive, everything more expensive. So I think for early stage companies, it's a good time to build because you need time to build up a real company.
You both mentioned the difference, or some of the difference that we've seen in European markets and US markets. Stefan, if you look at health investment in US and Europe, we're far behind in Europe. Is that true? Health tech?
So you have to see, this is a complex question you're answering, but give me 60 seconds to explain it. If you have a direct comparison between a US company and a European company, the cash flow you can see, I've seen it with Holiday Check and TripAdvisor, Zing and LinkedIn, as long as they have the independent. The American companies usually produce between 5 and 8 times the revenue and the cash flow a German company, direct competitors. Means the reason that the American valuations are usually double as high as the European one is justified. It's absolutely justified because you buy there a company that has usually much more cash flow, is much more robust in an environment like now, and don't underestimate it. If you make it, if you're YouTube, 120 YouTube started, only one got through it. If you have really fought that fight and you win, that YouTube alone is probably today a fourth of the whole Alphabet value. So what I want to say is, it is very clear there is a systematic advantage for North America, because if you scale in a company in North America, in whatever field, you have one common market, you have one language, actually two. You might need Spanish for certain products, but if you look at the market, you have a 2-language market with 450 people who has the highest GDP in certain areas of the world. And to transfer that to Germany, it's very clear that it's to Europe, it's not possible, because if you have a company, you want to go to France, everything is very much different, or Spain than here in Germany. And the reason why we have lower valuations, it is exactly reason. That's the reason why the venture business in America is so much larger. The investment into venture and PE is so much larger because the return profile is much higher. So answering your question, yes, America is much stronger. And if I would bet money, if I see my own investments, I'm only investing into America. Big money, because I see scaling companies there. You have a huge thing. Here in Europe, you can invest, you can do it, you can make money, but if you look at the multiples, it's usually, what can I say, it is much smaller what you can make in America, if you really do it.
Markus, you said in your pre-interview before today's summit, you said it's fragmentation. Europe is fragmented, there's different regulations, rules all over the place. Yeah. What's the solution? Because obviously there's a very big competitive disadvantage for investors here in Europe compared to what Stefan just said about North America.
So, I mean, we do invest in US and in Europe. So we see, all these dynamics permanently. And I think, and we have, for example, when I talk to a German company, a startup, and saying like, okay, so how you scale? And they tell me, listen, now we integrate with this health insurance in Germany, and we do it in German, and so on. I say, okay, do you plan to expand? I say, yeah, well, next year we are rolling out to the US. And I said, no, you won't. Because as soon as you start to have traction in a specific market as a startup, you do everything for your client, for your customer. You don't think like in the US guy, who starts a business over there and he says, I just scale within that country and I have unlimited possibilities. And I think this is very hard. And as you said, if you go to France, if you go to any other market, you have to think twice to really want to do it. It's another competition and so on. So, and then also from the funding potential as well. I mean, it's like in the US, we have one investment, for example. I mean, they raise every 9 months. They raise new capital. Big rounds, big investors in. If this investor is in, then you get bigger check size. Versus in Europe, you still have to try to get it done, and you're all the time on the limit of liquidity, and how you get to the next level. And I think it's just it's really hard in some way. On the other way, you have maybe from the regulatory point of view, big advantages which you don't have in the US.
Maren, I mean, the European Union basically promised us to change our systems, or at least standardize some of our healthcare systems. Do you see anything of that happening at all?
I mean, it's a legacy system. And I don't know, have you ever tried to change something, for 80 million people, 80 plus million people overnight? I think this is just a challenge. I do look into other markets. I'm also working in Switzerland here and there. There are 8 million. Between 8 and 80 is a big difference. The cantons are actually talking to each other. There's still a challenge to modify everything. It is super, super hard to... First of all, we see, from a political level that Europe is not united, doesn't matter what. And we also see that healthcare is apparently set up very differently in each country. If you go to Sweden, for instance, is not just one country and one healthcare system. Like each area is very different as well. So we're not talking about like 26 or 27 countries, depending on how you count. We talk about even in these countries about different approaches. So I think it's nothing that will happen overnight. That is clear. And again, there's also always the challenge about, do you trigger this change, from a political level or based on money, or is that behavior change that we talked about an intrinsic change? If you force somebody to change something, it's very hard to maintain that because you have to continue forcing somebody, and that is very hard. So that from, I feel myself, I am a European, I'm traveling and I'm working different countries, so I'm based in Berlin, and yes, I'm German, but I'm more thinking about Europe most likely than being a German. But still, I see the faults and I see the pitfalls, and I also see that it's very hard to, unify everything that we like, and there's also reason for, certain different procedures per country. But what I wanted to also say from a European level, because at the moment we're also comparing a little bit Europe and the US. So I totally agree when you look into metrics like financial success. We do get a lot of international founders that come to us and say, I want to start in Europe. And there are tremendously a lot from the US. So they leave the US not for market reasons, but for reasons like impact and values, social inclusion. I think this is also the sweet spot at the end. So you can come to Europe, and of course you have a lot of healthcare systems that are social. You have a lot of systems that are very inclusive, or at least move into that direction. And then the question is, as a founder, what's more important for you? Is the big money, the big financial success more important to you, or is developing a good product that might not be financially, the exit candidate, but a product that is serving a special niche that is very important to you? So we see, the LGBT community, not just for political reasons, but also for the reason that the support of this community, also in healthcare, is much better in Europe than it is in the US. Maybe that's another trigger that makes Europe attractive for startups. And maybe, and I also see that, there are more and more investors that value the impact metrics even higher than the pure financial metrics. There needs to be a combination at the end, but the combination looks slightly different than, 3 times the valuation that we saw in classic cases. But, every investor has to decide, what's important, and at the end, VCs get money from other people, so they also have to fulfill certain promises.
You guys agree?
Yeah, in my point of view, it's a battlefield out there. I think value topic obviously is, especially in health. I would say almost every company we look at it, they're very mission driven. They have like a personal experience or a sister or brother who was suicidal and moved into mental health. We are also very mission driven. However, at the end of the day, you have to make the economics work. That's the game. If you don't make the economics work, it's just not play out. It's hard to fund it. It's hard to attract talents. It's just how it works. And I think sometimes, and it's sometimes hard to see, you have a strong impact with a certain product. It's a great product which really has meaningful impact on a community or a society, but it just doesn't have a good business model. And we have seen a bunch of them for kids, mental health for kids, for example, a topic we look into. Very hard to monetize, very hard to scale. You have to have schools involved in the US. Super complex, super relevant topic. We have a mental health crisis these days for kids, teenagers, adults. Top of the mind, but at the end of the day, software as a service just brings better returns. That's reality.
I think you mentioned something that's, flying a little under the radar, and you talked about mental health, which even, over the last 2 years through the pandemic has, obviously the field has changed extremely. People were locked in at homes. People were unable to meet. Fortunately, we're able to meet here again. But Stefan, how do you see that? Is that a new business, or is that an area that's probably undervalued right now? The telehealth, the mental health aspect?
I don't know.
Markus, you were invested, so you're betting on it?
Yeah, we are invested in one mental health company in San Francisco, focusing on teenagers. I think it's a huge problem. First of all, we invested alongside with the Melinda Gates Foundation. It's a big topic, and I think pandemic has it made even worse. Everything what is going on, fear out there in the market, energy crisis, geopolitical challenges, loneliness. A lot of people are lonely, live in big cities. It's by far the bigger pandemic than COVID itself. I think it's still stigmatized. It's hard to access. It's hard to know what I should do. To who should I talk? Why should I talk about it? So there is so much education and behavior change and awareness needed in that space. Honestly, I don't know what is the proper answer. There are a lot of telehealth companies out there. Economically, some didn't do well in the US. It's still early days. What is the right way to tackle? And I think at the end of the day, we have just not enough specialists. When you look to access to mental health is still in the US a tremendous problem. If you know that you need treatment, you don't get access, which is unbelievable.
Maren, what do you think?
Super complicated. First of all, you said there's a lot of stigma involved, but I think there's also, I think in the very early talk, or the second one, we had something like literacy from health. If you as a patient don't know how to describe, your feelings and your emotions, and we're not trained to do that, then you go to a doctor that most likely is also not trained and, has a tough time to understand. and then you bounce back and forth in the healthcare system. It's very hard to grab that. I think there's still not enough visibility and knowledge what mental health is. Where does it start? Where does it end? It looked like there is a hype going on, and I am very worried that it becomes a hype. Also, it should be like something that is treated seriously in the long term. But I also believe that, and I think this is something that you said, we are still trained to have this sick care system. So if you're not able to diagnose something in the mental health space, you are not technically sick in Germany. So it's like this weird gray zone that it's hard to grab. And actually, I also have a tough time grabbing it. So, you know, when I am depressed, what is stress for me? I mean, I tackle it in a slightly different way than others, I guess. So even for me, it's hard to grab. I think it is a big market, but I also think it's still quite hard to grab it, and it, you know, creates a lot of insecurity on all different levels.
Yeah, I've thought a minute about your question and what we discuss here. I think a lot of we should go one step back. And if you look how Facebook was created, there are lots of research papers being published from Stanford University, from the neuroscientist departments. So when they designed social media, they made sure that you do everything to come back by activating certain things in your brain. And I believe that a lot of the problems we got in the last 10, 15 years are combined through these kind of social media interactions we all have. And if you look at how Instagram is built and all these kind of platforms, they are built very much the same way, to spend minutes on the platform because they're the revenue. And the mobile boom we all have seen and we have participated has a downside. That means you're reachable all the time. And I believe if we really want to tackle that problem with mental health, we need that fundamental discussion. When do you switch off your mobile phone? When do you have time where you're not using, where you're not reachable, where you are not under pressure, where you, and I think I agree with everything you said, but we might need one more fundamental discussion before, because we only treating the results out of it, and we are not discussing the cause who all started. And I really appreciate all the politicians who now say, I go off of Twitter. So for me, Twitter is a huge important tool for new things. So I saw COVID 2 months before the journalists in Europe saw it, because it was on Twitter all over the place. And that's a great news source. But at the end of the day, there's so much hate and negative information and fight. And the question is it an advantage for the human being, or is it a disadvantage? And I believe a lot of these things who have been developed in the last 15 years have a very bad impact as well on society.
I know it was misreported a few years ago, but I think there was this report of the average attention span of a human being now being lower than, I think, a goldfish's. I think that was the comparison. It was not right, and it was a made-up story. But on building on what you just said, Stefan, I think I read a study somewhere that now the average attention span of a social media user is under 1 second.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, think of it. I mean, first of all, we are probably all addicted to our devices and technology. You know, we hang on these devices all the time. Nobody told us, nobody knows how to deal with it. Nobody knows how this is impacting us long term. Maybe somebody will, in 100 years look back and say, these guys were crazy, hanging on these phones all the time. And I think what you just said, I mean, is like, the biggest companies on these technology companies, they have brilliant minds who do nothing else to think about algorithms, to how you spend a second more on their platform. Netflix, the CEO said once, the biggest enemy is sleep, or biggest competition for them is sleep. So they want to grab our sleep, which is so important for mental well-being. We heard it before. So there's so many brilliant minds who work on products, keeping us engaged, and on all social media and so on. And to give an answer to that, I think we have to think of like how we can engage people on products and services which help you to stay healthy or become more healthier. And I think this is a field which I think is completely underserved yet, behavior change. A lot of products are out there, services and so on, but really looking at the human being, the complexity of a human being, and what it takes to stick to a product and change a behavior, because at the end of the day, it's all about that. How can I move a person from A to B to change the behavior, to live more, to use maybe less technology, or be off of the devices? This is the holy grail. But this is a long way. It's hard to tackle.
There is a study by McKinsey, it was done in 2022, that the global wellness market is $1.5 trillion US dollars, which is 4 times as big as global health care investment. How is it possible that we're spending so much on wellness and comparative little or fewer money on health tech and healthcare?
It's a question of definition. I mean, again, if you see, there are multiple stages. So you have the fitness and wellness area where you do not feel like a patient, you do not feel sick. And most of the time, you're also not working necessarily against becoming sick, but most of the time, it's feel good. Then you have, prevention. Could be that in your family somebody got cancer, and then you suddenly feel the pressure to work against a disease that might or not might come. In my case, riddled by cancer and dementia in my family, I went to, 23andMe and tried to get my genetic data just to ensure that the likelihood that I get sick is not high, and then I didn't have to change my behavior, easy peasy. There's no guarantee that you don't get certain diseases, even if your genetics said the likelihood is low. So this is kind of prevention against something. Then we have the phase where we start to self-diagnose ourselves by, taking pictures of the skin and checking, because I might or might not be sick, and then I move into becoming a doctor. I read more papers, I read more newsletters, I go to Google, I watch TV like my mom does. Immediately when she sees a disease coming up, she sees all the criteria to be
symptoms,
sick. Yeah, the symptoms, because again, she sees it on TV. But this is kind of a phase where you're still not classified as a patient, because in Germany you have to go to the doctor has to diagnose you, and then, once you're diagnosed, the story begins. But technically, only, I think, the health tech solutions that we talk about, the investment, maybe in your case, in the numbers, most likely refers to the diagnosis, treatment, rehabilitation phase, when somebody is sick and we have the sick care, because that early stage is still quite, it's hard to grab, because our system, ticks off people that went to the doctor much easier than actually everybody that does something at home.
Yeah, and maybe just, I totally agree to your points, and maybe just to add here, so what we see is, we also look into the longevity space. We have one of the top researchers globally in that space in our advisory. And when you look to longevity, for example, on a certain community or audience, people do everything, wellness, to live longer, better. Even though it works in mice, it works in animal trials, but nobody knows if it works in humans, if it's actually harming you long term. But people are kind of desperate to really try new products and things. And I think there's the biohacker community. I do this myself to a certain extent. But when you look to real science, and we talk to so many researchers, scientists, and so on, experts in the field for 30 years, people use products where the science, or let's say companies market products where the science is not there yet, but people are craving for, like, DNA testing or what kind of testing, and trying to do assumptions themselves and saying, oh, this means maybe this or that for that. The trend is over, they jump on the next one. So right now, for example, collagen was a big thing all over the place. The new thing is NMN. When you look to in China or research or Google data or search data, it's going through the roof. There is no proper, clear scientific evidence yet, but it's a great marketing opportunity, and this is why I believe wellness is such a tremendous market and drive more and more people into it all the time.
Maybe also something to add. We found a way to treat a lot of chronic diseases, which means the death ratio of somebody that has cancer, for a certain cancer, for a lot of cancer types, is actually not super high. There's a high likelihood that we can deal with certain diseases, which also means we live longer with certain chronic diseases. So, we also tend, once we had the situation or we are diagnosed with diabetes, or again, you have cancer and you fought it and you did your chemotherapy and the radiation, whatever, afterwards, I wouldn't say you overcompensate, but we see that this wellness and fitness and living better becomes even more important. But then we talk about people that live till, their 80s, their 90s. So 10 years ago or 15 years ago, as sad as it is, but a lot of patients from cancer actually did die in a certain time frame. Now we double and triple their lifetime after they were diagnosed, which also means they still need support, they still need medical help, which is also stressing the healthcare system in a way. So by treating people better, by ensuring that we survive certain diseases, we also, of course, have to deal with other challenges now. But I do believe that, especially if you have such a life-altering moment, you also move even stronger into wellness because you want to avoid becoming a patient again. So you see the cycle after reha, you bounce back into prevention, self-diagnosis, you become more aware. And then, of course, there's more spending in it.
Stefan, before we come to closing statements, what is currently the most underestimated sub-market in health and fitness tech?
I would say probably I've looked into many data-driven models, and at the moment you can't see, it's very hard to develop patterns out of it. So if you look at data-driven businesses, and they say we collect data and we have 100,000 data sets, I've seen companies with 500,000 data sets, and at the end of the day it doesn't correlate. And I think with the new processing power we get now, is that the new generation will be much better. Just to compare it, when Yahoo had a search, everyone had already a search, but it was Google coming out 10 years later, building the most powerful search. And probably we will see a couple of companies who are able to work with these kind of patterns and really develop products. I'm unsure what it is, whether it is whether these are data-driven products, whether these are products in hospitals like IBM who have fucked it up, and with hundreds of millions being burned.
We need to call Jeff back in from IBM.
IBM developed a big data-driven program where they tried to avoid, by analyzing data, to avoid clinical surgery mistakes. By just using big tons of, it didn't work out. They stopped it. And I believe that we will see certain companies who are able to make out products. So if I compare it for other, I've seen from my Lexstar perspective, where I'm advising companies, some data companies, and sometimes they have fantastic business models, and otherwise they don't. So it is important to have, I think you will see some fundamental companies coming out who have data and have products, and they are probably coming in the next 3-4 years, so you will see them.
Markus?
Yeah, I agree. Just underlining that, we are invested in one company who can read proteins out of blood data, which is, we have thousands of proteins. We probably have about 20,000 proteins in our blood. We can measure about 7,000 today. And only, new technology, machine learning, AI could start, process this kind of information. So I do believe this is one very strong angle. And I also do believe as another topic is, focusing on behavior change. So what is really changing our behavior for good? I think there's a tremendous power.
What Stefan said earlier, how the platforms influence our thinking.
Exactly. So turning that in a business model, making people to stick to the product. So it's a great business, but also has a great impact on your health. I do believe this is very big.
Maren, ladies first and ladies last.
I think an area that we would never be able to invest in will definitely be relevant in the future. There's so much money in pharma, and drug design is such a big topic. And computer-aided drug design, where you could use data, digital twins, but also speed up the way that new medication comes to the market. If you could just cut it in half, reduce the cost. That would be such tremendous help. I have seen startups doing it. It's such a hard market because it's so dominated by the big pharma companies. But if you would ask me where innovation is needed and where investment is needed, maybe not from, us, but investment, combined forces, from my point of view, it would be computer-aided drug design to speed up, the development of drugs, because again, chronic diseases need the support of medication at the moment. Behavioral change is not enough. In this combination, I think behavioral change with the power of data, brought into the big business of pharma could most likely make a big change in the future. But it's out of my scope, and this is painful to know.
I got to follow up with one point. Is that the tailor-made medication that we're talking about in the future?
This is one topic. So, of course, the question is, how can you, and I think we also had it in one of the sessions in the morning, super sapiens, I think you also said, we all are so different. So, again, if I get the same medication for every person, it doesn't make any sense because, again, the impact will be so different. But I'm also talking about the process behind what you as a patient, as a human, don't see. When we talk about BioNTech and everybody else, it's such an expensive business. It takes such a long time. But we see diseases that come up now. We have to wait for 15 to 20 years to get medication for that. At that time, people died. So why don't we cut the time in half? Why can we use technology, the computing power that we have? But what we also have to do, we have to rethink business models in pharma at the end, because again, they are making money, and they're also making money about, taking such a long time to get medication on the market. So there's a mix of, providing the data to make medication more suitable and more individualized. But at the end, I'm also talking about, bringing medication to the market that would not be on the market if we would not use technology to speed up the process.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for the great discussion we had. Hopefully you guys are all going to enjoy now the best part of the day, the drinks and the food. Thank you very much. Natalia?